dependent and independent variables. We know what are variables. We have watched the video. We understand that variable represents an unknown value. But what is independent and dependent? The word itself suggests that if it is dependent, then it relies on something else for its responses or for its outcome or for its value. Independent does not rely on any other input, but it stands alone by itself. That is a very crude way of saying what is dependent and independent. I think if we can see this in a value table, I think you will understand this better. So I have actually went ahead and prepared a value table so that you could see this and understand this better. Now I'm using variables x and y for a specific reason, which I will let you know in a short while. Now the condition is for every question answered correctly, 3 points is awarded. Okay, so every question you answer, you get 3 points. Now let's look at the value table. So here, 0 questions answered correctly. Therefore, no points is awarded. Here, 1 question answered correctly and 3 points awarded. 2 questions answered correctly, 6 points awarded. 3 questions answered correctly, 9 points is awarded. Now, from the way I say things, you could realize that the variable y, for some reason, has to wait for the responses or for the input from the variable x. Okay, so I can go ahead and write this equation. This equation says that the value of y equals to 3 times the value of x. Now what is x? X is the number of questions answered correctly. Right? Where do we get that? We do not get it from anywhere. If you sit for a test, you do the test, you have the number of questions. From that, the points or the scores will be awarded. So x here is the independent variable because it's not depending on anything. Whereas y, the outcome or the value of variable y depends on the variable x. Let's look at this. Let's try to do this here. So y is equals to 3 times, and let's say there's no questions answered correctly. So which means now y is 0. If what is the value of y when x is 1 and 3? And let's try another one. What is the value of y when 3 questions are answered correctly? And the value of y is 9. So if you could see, only when I substitute variable x with a value, we could determine the value of y. So which means y, variable y here, depends on the input of variable x. Therefore, variable y is dependent variable, variable x is independent variable. Now, from this equation itself, you could see that y is equals to 3x, and you would have seen dozens and dozens of equations that comes like this. Y is equals to something, this is equals to something. So remember, the subject of the formula is always the dependent variable, and it depends on the responses of the input or the independent variable. Now, to understand this even better, we could take this to a Cartesian plane. Now on the Cartesian plane, we have 2 axes. Okay, at least for the time being, we are still in 2-dimensional. So we have the x-axis and the y-axis. X-axis, which is the horizontal axis, is your axis that represents independent inputs, independent values, or independent variable. So in this case, we have 1, 2 and 3. Of course, this is the origin. and then the y-axis or the vertical axis is always the dependent variable. It represents the dependent variable. So this is 3, 6 and 9. So I can go ahead and plot. When 0 questions are answered correctly, I get 0. 1 question answered correctly, I get 3. 2 questions answered correctly, I get 6. And 3 questions answered correctly, I get 9. Okay, so basically we can draw a line connecting all this. Hopefully it's, yeah. From this line which represents y equals to 3x, we could put in the coordinates here. When one question is answered correctly, which is the independent variable x, you get 3 points awarded, which is the dependent variable y. When you answer 2 questions correctly, you have received 6 points. When you answer 3 questions correctly, you are awarded 9 points. As you can see, this is the x variable, this is the y variable. As most of you will know that a coordinate is always written as x and y. This is a pair of coordinates. So remember, the coordinates also represent when x is the independent variable, y would be the dependent variable. And it's not necessary that it has to be x and y always. We could also change this to any other variables that we want to use, as long as you understand which is the dependent variable and which is the independent variable.